So hello, everybody, and good afternoon. So today, I'll talk a little bit about how, today I'll talk a little bit about how we at PagerDuty went from slipping to shipping products on a consistent manner. So first, quick agenda. So I'm going to start with a little bit of an introduction about me and PagerDuty. And I'm going to take a specific use case at PagerDuty and walk through the steps that we took. Although the steps are specific to PagerDuty, the approach is generally extensible to any SaaS company. Keeping in theme of the conference, I'll avoid trying to getting into the why as much as the what. But happy to discuss those things later as well. I'm the Senior Director of Engineering for our core incident management product at PagerDuty. I have over 18 years of experience in the B2B SaaS environment and across smaller companies, smaller startups, and large enterprises, most recently before PagerDuty at Salesforce as well. I live in the Bay Area, and outside of work, I love music, I love cars, and I like philosophy as well. About PagerDuty. So our mission is to revolutionize operations and build customer trust by anticipating the unexpected in this unpredictable world. So we are a public company, and we serve over 1 million end users across 26,000 customers that we have. A large part of that customers we serve, big customers, like 2/3 of Fortune 100 customers. 100 companies are our customers, and half of Fortune 100 companies are our customers as well. So speaking of product development hubs, so we have several hubs. We are distributed by design. So we have several hubs in Toronto, SF, Atlanta, Lisbon, and Chile. And also we have a sizable population outside of these hubs and working remotely as well. So the PagerDuty Operations Cloud is the AI-powered platform for automating and accelerating mission-critical operations. So we have over 700 integrations that we integrate into other companies. So through this, we create 87% fewer incidents, reducing mean time to resolve incidents by 25%. And within our CS Ops product, we actually are able to deliver higher CSAT scores as well. So with that, before we dive into the topic itself, I have a quick question for you all. How does your leadership and your other stakeholders within your company know about the status of in-flight initiative or project? So by show of hands, can you see how many? Can you tell me how many of you use reports and dashboards or other kind of workflows? Okay, few of you are doing. That's great. How many of you use recurring in-live meetings to achieve the same thing? That's the same amount of people as well, so that's great. How many of you use status reports from our emails in a periodic manner? Okay, about 10, 15 people as well, so that's great. And do you also use Program Manager, TPM, or any other functions? A few of you as well. So I think there is a good spread across one or multiple mechanisms to keep your stakeholders up to date. So within PagerDuty, we use status reports. So to talk a little bit about what status reports is, it's really nothing much more than a Google Doc that we all collaborate and send it out to the company every 2 weeks. So this is cross-functional, and it is received by the whole company. And it allows us to asynchronously engage with our leadership and answer questions that might come. Here's a quick structure of what individual status reports for status updates for each project would look like. I want to draw attention to one small thing, which is a slip, which is basically a change from the original commitment date from when the project was committed. So we still retain those dates, but we actually strike through it and put a new date through that. So with that, here is an actual status update from 2 years ago, where a project had slipped more than 7 months meeting at the EA or the early access milestone, and a similar thing happened for general availability or the GA milestone. So this was not just one project, but there were several projects like this. That was how things was a couple of years ago. Here's a more recent one. Even when I specifically took the generative AI example, because there were a few more unknowns when we were all dealing with it a few months ago. And as you can see, we were able to ship this still very fast, but we broke it down into milestones and able to deliver that as well. Here is another example where there are strike-throughs, but they swung on the other direction, where we were able to actually ship this earlier than what we had committed. Of course, we do slip occasionally, but when we do, in this example, an EA date actually slipped, we still got back on track, and it only slipped once, a couple of times, but we got back on track before the GA timeline. So how did we transform this slipping from shipping consistently? So I'll highlight through a few steps that we took in order to make this happen, and they are broadly classified into three main buckets. So the first one is we started off by understanding the contributing factors. So basically, we started assessing what are all the factors that are influencing this and came up with some hypotheses. And the next step, we set out to define the future itself. We set a vision of what good looks like so that we can work backwards from that. And we also had to go through a cultural transformation in order to make that happen. And then the next step was to reset from an execution standpoint. This is the part where we reset how we work by even forming the teams accordingly and creating many frameworks and process improvements to enable that. So step one, assessing and building trust within our team. So this is a crucial step as we faced a multidimensional situation, and we wanted to solve it holistically rather than solving it piecemeal-wise. So this is in the line of thinking that a problem that is well-defined is a problem that is half solved already. So with that, we asked ourselves, what is broken here? So to set a little bit of a context here, the technology stack was 13 plus years old that we had. On the front end, we had Backbone and Amber for a long time, and then we decided to move to React, again, popular story, but that migration was halfway through it. On the back end, we had Ruby and Elixir, then we moved to Java, and there was some Python as well. And then from a data pipeline perspective, we re-architected that, and we were migrating to Snowflake. We also started with a monolith, as every other company does, and then that became a giant monolith at some point, and then we shifted over to microservices. So what we ended up was a giant monolith with a lot of fragmented microservices, which was basically causing a lot of inconsistent experience and also with the developers as well. So that's just with the technology side of things. From a people side of things, there were in many cases, there were like 3 people per team. So you can imagine, like, one person goes on PTO, and the other person probably gets in an incident, and they're dealing with a fire. So now you're like having one person that is actually running a project. You can say goodbye to your sprint plans and any other plans that you have to execute those at that point. So then we started asking ourselves, like, why is it broken? A lot had to do with accumulation of a lot of product and technical debt over the years. And also a lack of prioritization. So we were operating with the mindset of everything is important and urgent, which doesn't bode well with a lot of the competing priorities that we had. And we also focused heavily on autonomy of teams, which is great, which we should, but there was not the same level of emphasis given on alignment. So this was the case of good intentions alone are not good enough. So with that, we defined what good should look like, and then compared with the delta between what we have and where we need to go, and then validated these hypotheses with our internal stakeholders and make sure we got the feedback from them. So we were also very intentional about building the trust across all the stakeholders. For example, we talked to the leadership with written down plans so that they could engage in a much more productive way and ask questions and debate with us. Similarly, with peers, we got their feedback in case we have missed something, which is in our blind spots. Similarly, with your directs, it is very important to debate and discuss a lot of these things because they are the ones that will actually carry the message forward for you. And across your org, we essentially ended up over-communicating, which is we repeated the what and the why. As the golden rule goes, a message needs to be repeated 7 times before it can be heard and understood. So this allowed all the folks across the different stakeholder spectrum to get the context and get the direction on where we are heading. So we then set a clear goal on how things needs to be done and how we will start holding ourselves accountable. So this is important so that we can actually work backwards and make appropriate short-term trade-offs. So one such important execution goal that we set was essentially in the Perto principle angle, which is we are not going to slip more than 20% of our projects in a year. And even when we do slip, they're not going to slip more than 20% of the original time estimate. So this was a simple, grokkable goal that we set and repeated, making sure that everyone is aligned to this. So once we set this, we put a simple mechanism to keep us on track. So I think yesterday Zach Islam talked a little bit about mechanisms, and he went into great detail about how to do that. So our mechanism was get your say-do ratio closer to 1. So what is it? So say what you're going to do and put that in a smart goal format so that it can go into any alignment tool that you might have. So we use V2MOM, which is derived from Salesforce. OKRs is another great example. But putting that as a smart goal is an important step. And once you do, then do what you're going to say that you said you will do. So this mechanism allowed us to drive accountability and push decisions down to the individual teams, thereby maintaining their autonomy, but crucially, also bringing predictability and alignment in the same process. So I want to show you a quick picture on an actual say-do ratio for incident management from last year. So you might be wondering, wait a second, this is, even at the end of the year, you did not actually achieve all of the things that you initially set out to do. But that's actually a little bit of a prioritization discussion because the focus of this part was to make sure we are going to commit to the dates that we're going to complete the things that we actually committed to. But reducing the scope and prioritization is a different, beast in itself. So the next step of cultural transformation is a little bit of a delicate one. So we identified areas where we need to evolve our culture, but still ground ourselves in the values and principles of the company. So we brought in accountability and focus on customer and focusing on execution to the forefront of everything that we do. In fact, we even updated our career architecture or career ladder to make sure that execution and business impact are necessary traits, in the career ladder as well. So here is an example of recent example of where we codified our culture shift. So we brought some of these concepts into life by applying them to ourselves and reinforcing them at every meeting and every chance we get, and essentially radiating this outwards to the rest of the company as well. So now, in order to handle so many fundamental shifts, we had to bake them into our day-to-day work. We're all creatures of habit, right? So that's where we started having right-sized processes that helped us stay aligned and remove that cognitive overload for us to run together in a consistent manner. So staying true to our mission, so we implemented a planning and alignment framework at various altitudes. So let me explain a little bit about that. So at the top level, we started with something called as long-range plan, or LRP, as you see. So this typically talks about the direction that you want to head in 3 years from now, and essentially paints a vision where you want to be in 3 years' time. It's not super specific. It's not defined in a very specific feature or anything like that, but it really paints a picture into where you want to be as an org, as a product, as a team 3 years from now. And using that as a goal, we work backwards to define the next year's goal. In our case, that reflects in our V2 MOM. And then it doesn't matter which tool you use, it could be OKRs, but the key here is to focus on prioritization, because if everything is important, then nothing is. So this whole structure of prioritization is also designed to fail from the bottom, so that way you get the top priority items done, and some of the nice to haves or other things can potentially fall off. And also one other key thing to make sure, especially in a culture, in a company like us, where there's complexity is very high, dependencies actually make or break your product feature delivery. So it's very important to focus on that as well. So once that yearly plans are laid out, then we essentially fractally got back to the next quarterly planning. The goal for quarterly planning was to essentially start on day one of every quarter with hands-on coding, hands-on development work, not planning work. So in which case, the planning should start like a couple of weeks earlier so that the teams are aligned on what are you committing for the whole quarter, and essentially it becomes an execution quarter than like figuring out what to build. So once these things are put in place, the final structure that we put in place was what is called as program core team. So this is a cross-functional leadership group that we meet on a weekly basis, like engineering leadership for each team and the different layers, product, design, and any other dependencies that might have. So the idea behind this is to make sure that we just quickly go through all the items in progress in flight. And if there is any item that requires help, that requires alignment, that requires to be course corrected, this is the synchronous way for us to quickly do those things. So with that, we then shifted focus towards creating well-formed teams. So the well-formed is a little more static and structural, like you can do that in a paper and things like that. But getting healthy is a little more dynamic and a live process, if you will. So we structured our teams to really align with our business objectives, essentially looking forward from 12 to 24 months perspective. So with that, we first started off with a team composition. So we started with like saying each team needs to have around 7 people, plus or minus 2 is fine, but it needs to have a good, healthy mix of seniority, skill set, and other things that is required for the team to function independently. And then we also looked at staffing ratios so that there's enough good coverage from management and leadership perspective, which could be engineering manager to developer ratio, it could be EM to PM to design ratios, and so on. And the next thing is we streamlined our team charters. So making sure that the team's charters are consistent. In some cases, when we had to merge the teams, something had to like go below the line. Those are some of the hard decisions that we had to make and work through those. But at the end, we set up our teams to be autonomous for the charters that they are working on. Similarly, we also considered operational load because there is tech debt, and that varies depending upon the features and whatnot, and also balance that with the feature delivery. And looking at other things like planned versus unplanned work, how many people are going on call, what are the customer success metrics, and so on and so forth. The idea behind all of this is to make sure that the structure is visible and transparent to everybody, and to a large extent, to remove the mystery behind a lot of decision making that the individual engineers might not be aware of. So I want to call a special note to engineering and product partnership. As leaders, we all spend a lot of energy and time thinking about what's next and how do you do that and things like that. But to the point of EM and product partnership, here is one idea that we double down on, which is we are going to tackle things together and not just tackle each other. because it's very important to understand that we are in the same boat. And if we are wasting our energy tackling each other, we are essentially sinking at that point together. Doesn't matter who goes first. But instead, how do we stay afloat and how do we go fast? That's the part where we work together. So some of the common areas that we aligned and worked together consistently was what and how does work get into our backlogs. And for that, we essentially used a lot of the discovery process and the definition of ready and things like that. And also from a feature development versus technical debt perspective, we started off with this structure that 75% of a team's capacity would go towards product features and 25 would go towards tech debt. But it would actually vary and evolve later, but this is the starting point. Even in fact, in some cases, it actually went as high up as 50-50 because that team had a lot of historical ownership and things like that. So bringing all these things together, here are my top 3 learnings on how we went from slipping to shipping. The first step is we applied our experience and judgment to come up with a bespoke solution to the bespoke problem that we had. Second step was for us to define the future state, where we define what good looks like so that we can work backwards from that. And then we also transformed our culture to focus on customer impact and execution. And the third step was we reset our org and teams and structured them in a way that can make the execution possible. And we created a lot of frameworks and processes to make sure that we can stay on track with as little overhead as possible. So the outcome of doing all of these steps is the same org over the last 2 years has been consistently doubling their output year over year, while also improving the quality and reliability of the product consistently. So before we move to the questions, I want to thank you all for listening, and thank you, Plato, for giving me an opportunity to talk about this. And also have, I think, roundtable table 4 right after this, so we can definitely talk a lot more if we cannot go through all the questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Manu. Sounds like it was a really daunting challenge, and thanks for sharing all of your learnings for turning things around. So we have a couple of questions that are similar, and burning question I'm sure you anticipated. How did you, with this kind of 20% limit on slippage, how do you avoid like sandbagging and just like overestimating, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it is totally okay because we were starting from a place where we were dealing with like 6-month plus slippages. So in that case, we actually, in fact, even said, double your estimate. Whatever you think is the first number that you can come up with, just double it. Because the idea was for us to actually get to predictability, not efficiency. The efficiency comes later. You need a lot of track record to actually improve upon things. But that really gave the teams almost like a green signal to like, okay, let's figure out how to solve this problem.
Now, that's an interesting approach. Next question. It's a great point about cascading failures. Do you have a service catalog that maps dependencies, or are your services monolithic enough that it's not necessary?
Yeah, in fact, our product has a great service directory as well, and we do have functional registry with all the service catalog, and we do we track SLOs at the system level and also at the critical user journey levels. There is also another thing that we're working on right now to figure out how can we get the SLOs at the service level so that we can actually manage the impact at the team level as well.
Right. Can you elaborate on your updated career ladder? What changes you made and why?
Yeah, so we had 3 specific career ladders. So like I'll talk about the 2, which is one is the IC career ladder, and the other one is the engineering manager career ladder. So on the IC ladder, we really brought back business impact as one of the key output or outcome that we are expecting out of our engineers. Because at the fundamental level, we, as a technology org, we are in service of the business. So technology should essentially be an enabler for growing our business, So putting that as the front and center to then drive all the other behaviors and and impact, that was one of the key shifts that we made. Similarly, from an engineering management perspective, there was a lot of focus on how do I enable the engineers and support them and make them happy, which is again a great thing to have. But your goal as an engineering leader is to actually grow and grow our team and grow as in with a growth mindset, not the org size. And how do you put that into the codify that is essentially you think about like the comfort zone and the stretch zone and things like that, right? So as a key thing from your management perspective, you need to try to get your engineers into that stretch zone, so that because the growth happens there. So shifting that was one of the fundamental things that we did.
All right. In a startup where change is the only constant, what is your advice for planning backwards, especially for orgs in which priorities change each quarter?
Build for evolution and not for perfection. Because I think we are always looking for a perfect solution and going as quickly as possible. But when you look at what is really successful, it is successful either it solves a real customer problem and creates value, or it creates more adoption from the customer. So getting that customer feedback in the loop of your SDLC is critically important. In B2C, probably you'll get that feedback fairly quickly. In B2C, it might take 6 months. So having that in the key decision-making of your product development is a critical aspect of it.
All right, so I think the Slido, we have a little lag here. So why don't we just we have a few more minutes. Why don't we just take any questions from the audience? Any questions? We have one here. I have a little microphone. Thank you.
I really like your, can you hear me?
Yes.
I really like your presentation, and I think a lot of engineering managers actually share the same problem as you described. So my question is very simple. Can you share the slides publicly?
I think so. I think this is all.
Yeah, I think we'll be posting the recordings and the content and everything probably on our website.
With my own team. Thank
Absolutely. You. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I wanted to make sure the PII is blocked out in our decks.
Okay. Any other questions from the group? How about over here? Oh, there's a mic back there.
Is this working?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what were some of the processes and rituals that you implemented at the team level to improve execution?
Okay, that's a good question for the engineering managers because I think different teams adopted different processes. So for example, there's one team in my org that actually follows Kanban versus another one that uses Scrum, and and they use different toolings as well, like to keep them up to date. As in, like we all use Jira, but the thing is, some teams are more comfortable with having like spreadsheets, or like they automate things and they use reports versus things like that, right? So that decision is exclusively with each of the teams to how to manage that. The higher order objective and the goal that we track is essentially the say-do ratio and making sure that we are true to our commitments from planning and execution at that level. Hope that answered.
I see a hand way back here with the suit jacket. Yep. I think he's bringing the mic to you.
I've seen the change. You started change, but it's very easy to regress. How did you sustain to continue to deliver? Like what some of the rituals or metrics you continue to measure, or you do it today also?
Yeah, so one of the key things, this is a great question because it's easy to fix a problem, but it's hard to actually keep it going in a sustained manner. So that's one of the reasons why defining what good looks like with an unbiased view as a first starting point was very important for us, because we then said, okay, a healthy, sustained team, a healthy, sustained product, these are all the things that would actually look like. And we started with that, and then we said, okay, we are only going to do 2 of these 10 things, because we cannot do it all in a year or 2. So we are consistently tackling 1 or 2 things at a time, so that we build on the successes that we have already established, and not do something only to see that 6 months later it actually has regressed. So it's a very important point that you're bringing up. It's important to actually keep that momentum going.
Maybe one last question over here. Do you want to just grab this one?
So after you've gone through all this major change in your processes, and it looks like you're not slipping as much as you used to. And do you find that, well, has it actually improved, quarterly estimates, or each of those different levels where you estimate, have actually improved those estimates, and are you more confident in them?
Yeah, so I think that's another great question. So we look at it, fundamentally from how do we mature operationally. So the first step was predictability, and the second step is efficiency, right? So I think we really wanted to get the predictability right, so that we can say, okay, next quarter or next 3 quarters, we're going to improve our efficiency by 5%. So let's figure out what are all the things that is needed to make that happen. Because it's not just it's not that the engineers are not working hard. In fact, they're actually working really hard. A lot of times what is happening is maybe our tooling is not up to date to actually make them run faster. Maybe the problem space has gone up to a higher order, and we might need to actually build more platform primitives in order to make that work happen faster. So identifying those prerequisites that are required to be in place so that they can actually deliver 10, 20% faster for the next level is important. Otherwise, I think it goes back to the same thing. Like, yeah, we can probably hit the immediate next goal very quickly, but if you're not building on top of the previous successes and the structures that we have built, something else is going to break somewhere else. So that is how we are looking at it. It's almost like if you want to climb a hill, you kind of go around in a circle in an incremental manner, because you need to hit all the different dimensions and improve them consistently.
We are out of time for questions, but one last question from me. What do you enjoy so much that makes you completely lose track of time?
All right, I'm going to cheat on this a little bit with 2 answers.
It's not coding, is it?
It's not. So one is meta thinking. This is a corny answer. But anytime I hear some news or tech or otherwise, I kind of go back to like, okay, what are they building or what are they doing? Why are they doing? And the important question is like, if I were in that position, what would I do? So it's just a rabbit hole of thinking there,
The philosophy you were talking about.
Yes. But a more, quicker and near-time answer, individual answer is, I love spending a lot of time with my kids. And that's, yeah.
Awesome. Good answer. Thank you. Everybody, thanks for joining us.